Hey guys, I'm Brent.
I'm Lila, and you can find us on the web at www.braintrustlive.com.
That's right. Here we are
You
in the
guys, it's hot
LA.
now, which nobody wanted. Nobody wanted that to be added to. Coronavirus was bad enough
Yeah. And it
before.
doesn't actually burn away coronavirus, by the way. There's been a million studies of this. So just because Trump had some magical thinking that it was like going to burn away in April is not real, actually. So don't
Right.
don't be like, be thankful that it's a million degrees outside, because no.
I was so desperate to find anything approaching good about the heat that I was like, maybe Trump will be right and the coronavirus will disappear because it's hot.
Yeah.
So I'm still holding out hope that he's right about something. One thing he was not right about this week was the idea that you should drink bleach to prevent coronavirus. That's
Or
not
inject
what
it.
you should do. You shouldn't inject
Whichever.
it. You also,
Yeah.
there is no device currently that you can get an internal UV
UV
light
light.
disinfection
Yeah, so
from.
don't swallow one of those.
Don't swallow a UV light. Don't stick it into an orifice of any sort. You should just use UV lights as you've been using them previously, which is to say not use them because no one has a UV light. And if you have one, it's probably to disinfect your phone. That's fine.
Right.
Do you.
Yeah,
But
use it and use it for that. Your phone is very
your
dirty.
phone is disgusting. So by all means, disinfect your phone, but certainly don't disinfect yourself with a UV light.
No.
If UV light helped disinfect you, then the sun would also disinfect you. And that is currently not enough to prevent you from getting coronavirus. So this was, I think, the biggest sort of kerfuffle of the Trump coronavirus response.
Yeah.
Because so he afterwards tried to pretend like he'd been joking, like he was being sarcastic.
He said the next day that he was being sarcastic.
Right.
Yeah.
But when
Just
you
to
actually
see what everybody
watched
would do.
right. When you actually watched it, it's like clear he's not being sarcastic. There is not a joke, unless he's a man who doesn't know how to tell a joke, which I would argue he's a professional entertainer. He is actually a man who knows how to tell a joke. He was just not joking in this context.
Correct.
And
he's like looking over to his medical experts, like as he's saying these things and like talking about how like maybe it's something that we can look into, as if he sort of like has just had a brilliant idea that no one had thought about drinking bleach before.
The Surgeon General had to tweet not to drink bleach. Lysol had to tweet not to eat Lysol. Clorox had to tweet not to eat Clorox. All of your favorite disinfection brands were forced to clarify for their customers that they should not be consumed. The LA Times sent me a push notification telling me not to eat bleach, to drink bleach.
Oh, shit.
So this caused some chaos.
Yeah.
And now I think because of the chaos, because everyone was so horrified, we might have rid ourselves of the worst scourge on the coronavirus riddled airwaves of America, which is to say we might have rid ourselves of Trump's daily press briefings.
Right. Well, I think the Trump calculus on these press briefings has always been that he could just go out there and basically give a campaign speech. I mean, he literally showed a propaganda video during one of these. And, so he's using it in place of rallies, which he can't have right now. And Joe Biden can't be on television for, 2 hours every day. I mean, he sort of is trying in, futile ways.
He's trying to be on television once a week in a contained environment because he too can't be trusted to speak extemporaneously.
Right. Exactly.
So this is a double problem. But
But I think that and look, all of his sort of, fans and his rabid base is gonna also pretend like he was just being sarcastic, because they are people less than him probably who get a joke.
Right.
So I don't necessarily think that it's like gonna like send all of his base like running and being like, oh, Trump is trying to kill me and tell me to drink Clorox. But like broadly, big picture, I think that are finally starting to see that maybe this is like a bigger hindrance than it is like actual help. Like maybe it's not such a great idea to have him on television. I would contend to a large degree, if this can go, I mean, I don't want it to go on until November, obviously, but like I think Joe Biden is also to a degree being helped by getting to live in his basement for months on end. Because look, I don't want him out saying things in public either.
Well, no, but his aides don't either.
I mean, we're gonna like end up in a presidential general election here where like both men are gonna be like attempting to stay inside more than the other.
Yeah, I mean, I think the
That's where
issue
we're
with
at.
Trump is that he doesn't seem to have the instinct to stay inside himself. His advisors have seen this coming. You know, there have long been reports of aides trying to prevent him from speaking more than strictly necessary at these press briefings.
Right.
There have been aides who have been struggling to sort of,
or to have him not take questions, like
right, to have him not take
have him
questions.
give a statement about the state of things, and like maybe do like a little like rah thing and have show like some empathy, which he never does. But like if he were only to do that and then like allow people to ask like reasonable questions of like his medical experts, then like maybe that could be a thing potentially.
Right,
That's kind of what he did on Friday. But
that's what I think they have been trying to convince him to do. And the problem is he can't make himself do it. He's not,
no, he can't stand up on stage and let everybody else like steal the limelight from him.
No, exactly. I mean, you can see that because every day he tweets about the great ratings he got.
Yeah.
So for him, this is spectacle. And I think his aides have been trying to sort of limit his involvement in it for a long time, and have discovered that short of canceling them altogether, there was actually no way for him to be more controlled in these environments. And so they have, I think, you know, you've been hearing reports about them trying to cancel these things forever, and he won't let them do it because he loves it, because it's a daily time that he gets to be in the limelight, where everyone is just like excited to hear from him and then talks about him all day, just like his favorite thing in the world. But Saturday was the first time since Easter that he hasn't had one. And
he tweeted about it.
Suddenly, for no reason at all, unrelated to anything, he tweeted that he thinks that these press briefings might not be worth his time anymore.
No.
So much effort. Why waste all that effort?
Right. He said, what is the purpose of having White House news conferences when the mainstream media asks nothing but hostile questions and then refuses to report the truth or facts accurately? They get good ratings, and the American people get nothing but fake news. Not worth the time and effort.
Right. So now it's his idea to stop them. It's not everyone else's for being furious that he suggested Americans drink bleach. It was his. He came up with it. And I think actually, like, the problem here is more sort of real than you would think, because it's really common to hear people right now make jokes along the lines of, so what if Trump voters want to drink bleach? And like, look, it's not actually okay to even hope that Trump voters drink bleach. The president should not be encouraging even voters that we don't agree with to imperil their health and their lives with bad medical advice or, you know, dangerous advice like this. So like that joking is even like, I think like there are times that I feel like, so what if Trump voters XYZ fall victim to one of his dumb policies? This, I don't hope they die though. Like this is like already, this is a very extreme problem. And the reason we know it's an extreme problem is because multiple governors got on the news today, Sunday, to report that their states have seen an increase in calls related to this suggestion, whether that be people seeking guidance about it or whether that be emergencies related to people trying to ingest disinfectants. So it's like there are people that do trust the president for better or worse, and those people should not have their health imperiled by his idiocy. And also, they just did have their health imperiled by his idiocy. So Larry Hogan from Maryland was on This Week, ABC's Sunday show this morning, saying that they got hundreds of calls about the suggestion. Gretchen Whitmer said the same thing. Like this is, and I think the Poison Control Department in New York also reported that they saw a huge increase in calls. This is actually having like tangible consequences for people, as like ridiculous as it sounds. Because as soon as he said it, everyone was like, well, everyone knows not to drink bleach. And it's like, look, sure, factually, everyone probably does know that. But like
children know that.
Children know that, but also people don't know the limits of their own knowledge a lot of the time. So when people who seem like they have authority suggest dumb things, people do sometimes take that advice. And for better or worse,
especially you're more apt to do something like that also if you're like in a state of panic or you're scared.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Everyone's really stressed.
Right.
You know, I was talking to Brent earlier this week about sort of like how I'm watching stress responses roll out among people in very different ways. And some, you know, like there's sort of like on the one hand, people that are like getting more and more rigid about following the kind of stay-at-home rules. And then there's people who are also kind of loosening their interpretations of the stay-at-home rules. And I see sort of both of those as stress responses. I mean, after 9/11, we saw tons of that downtown where people who were in what history turned out to prove rightfully angry about being asked to return to an unsafe place were incredibly angry. But so were the people who were insisting that the air was safe. They would get like really, really worked up if you suggested that the air wasn't safe, that you were breathing and they weren't breathing. And so it got to the point where like for months we were just in this like weird cycle of policing each other's speech about it.
Yeah.
And it had to do with the fact that we didn't get incorrect, we got incorrect information from the top, and we were dealing with months of prolonged stress that had to do with an ongoing thing in our lives. So like, because
exactly
9/11 was ongoing for us because it was a health crisis that went on for months. We were sort of living this moment at that time. And I'm sort of like seeing that happen now where you can tell that people are more stressed than they are claiming to be because of the way that they are sort of like responding to the restrictions that we're under right now. So all that is to say, don't blame people for trying to drink bleach. Just seek to not let anyone suffer through that bullshit.
Yeah.
Because who knows what's going on with people.
Yeah.
In any case, the good news, the news is that Republicans are starting to worry, largely based on performances like this, that Trump is going to maybe kill their chances in the Senate. And listen, that wouldn't be so bad.
That wouldn't be so bad at all. And like, look, this is something that, like, had any of these Republican senators been listening to this podcast for like literally years, I mean, the thing that we have been saying about the Senate, and I have been surprised that this hasn't happened, and maybe it'll be the coronavirus that will push them to do so. But I have always felt like some of these senators in these states that are probably going to lose, like Cory Gardner is probably going to lose in Colorado, like, and we're going to get into some more of these states and sort of like talk about what the Senate could look like after 2020. But like, why on earth hasn't, especially Susan Collins, who has sort of like, while she doesn't do it as much as we would like her to, has every once in a blue moon sort of like done something right. I mean, it's been a good decade probably since the last time that happened. But, I mean, like, why has she not completely just run away from this guy? She's a person who fancies herself to be an independent, even though that's a sort of hogwash. But like, what is she? The only way that these senators who are in swing state and like close races that are like toss-ups, the only way that they win is to run away from this guy. And they could have done it 6 months ago. There's still time for him now. And like, look, I hope they don't, because that might be the only way that they could win. But like,
well, good news, I don't think they will.
I don't think that they will either. I think maybe Martha McSally in Arizona ekes it out, because Arizona's terrible, although it's been moving further to the left, and she just previously lost an election. But like, I don't understand what they're all thinking. And like, look, if they want to think wrong and lose, then God bless them.
Right.
I mean, I'd rather not have Cory Gardner in the Senate any longer. I mean, that would be lovely.
I feel like I have two PSAs related to this story. The first is for the Republicans, and it's don't chain yourself to a madman because you get madness. That is a lesson that we've been trying to impart to everyone for years. Yeah. PSA number 2, though, is that this is a story about Republicans losing, but the Democrats should not take it as a story about Democrats winning. The Democrats should not read anything into the polls that we are about to talk about and the trends that we are about to discuss, because polling this early out is not determinative of anything. You can't take a win for granted in a very fast evolving situation like this. You have to work like the win is not assured. And I think that the stories like this are what gave us the false sense of complacency with Clinton.
I think you're right.
This early out, Clinton was blowing out everyone in the Republican field. And so this early out, it seemed like a Clinton win was assured. And I know that because it seemed that way until the day of election.
Right.
So so don't assume that polls like this change anything about your strategy as Democrats.
Yeah.
But Republicans, I feel like, should maybe take some of these polling numbers and think to themselves about some choices that they've made.
Yeah.
Because obviously the Republicans would prefer not to lose the Senate. And obviously we're in a huge economic crisis. We are now at 26 million unemployment claims.
Yeah, there were another 5 million.
Another 5 million. Literally, the California system is so overloaded that if you try to go on to do a continuing claim with them this week, they tell you not to bother, and they're just going to pay everyone, and they'll get back to you later in case there were hours or adjustments that you need to make. Like, they can't even, like, California can't even handle the re-upping of the claims. But so in any case, surveys and polls are showing that Trump is starting to trail significantly in some battleground states. So there were polls in Michigan and Pennsylvania, and even in Florida, he's behind right now, and that's a must-win for him. So Biden is leading in like virtually every competitive state. And the one state that Trump hoped to pick up in this cycle, Minnesota, he's now trailing by like 10 points or something. According
I don't
to
see that. That's not going to happen.
No, I don't think so either. And that's,
I get it. It's always close, but like it hasn't moved in any significant way
Right.
in
And
his
that
direction. Like that's
is also, I don't think in this environment necessarily
no.
This isn't the moment for Minnesota.
No.
But so in any case, we are also starting to see Republican senators in a bunch of competitive states trailing or in dead heats with with Democratic rivals who no one's heard of. So
Right.
like, you know, Susan Collins is in a race against what's her name? Sarah Gideon. Is that?
Yeah, I think so. She's like the speaker, I think.
Yeah, Sarah Gideon. She's the House Speaker there.
Yeah.
She outraised Collin. I'm not going to do the math here, but she raised $7 million, and Collins raised 2.4 in the last quarter.
Yeah.
So we're seeing them.
$7 million seems like quite a bit of money in a Maine.
In a Maine primary. I mean,
what is there one media market in Maine?
Exactly. Tom Tillis, same thing. He got, you know, his competitor, who's like an actual nobody, Democrat, outraised him by double. You know, I think he raised 2.1 million, and his opponent got like 4.3 or something. And his also from small dollar donations, which Tom Tillis has like no small dollar donors. We're seeing Cory Gardner and Martha McSally, as we talked about in Arizona and Colorado, start to either trail in polls or be within the margin of error in polls that they were leading earlier in the year.
I mean, Cory Gardner is going to get shot out of a cannon. I mean, like you can look at all three of these and sort of like maybe picture a world in which Tom Tillis wins again, and maybe the same for Susan Collins. I mean, I hope not.
I don't picture a world in which Susan Collins wins again.
I mean, I kind of don't. I kind of don't think so either.
The focus of so much fire
changes her calculus in the campaign. But also the other thing is that these people aren't actually able to campaign anyway. So like it's sort of, and you would think that to some degree that would favor incumbents, but like I don't know that it necessarily is because it's such a shit show right now.
Yeah, I feel like it's there might be just like a reactionary wave of people being like, whoever is in office is doing it wrong.
Yeah.
And that's interesting because like, you know, like Cory Gardner's like as Republicans go these days, like a fairly moderate Republican in a less unstable environment. He would be the kind of Republican that I don't think the Democrats would even work that hard to defeat because he's, you know, and I think the same has been true of yeah, but Colorado's been moving.
Yeah.
And Gardner is one of those Republicans that sometimes works across the aisle. I mean, he was our lead sponsor on the VCF bill on the Republican side.
Right.
So, you know, he is somebody who like sometimes works across the aisle. He has a good relationship with some Democrats. I feel like that is why we haven't worked harder for that seat recently. And so, and I think Susan Collins is in a different situation because she's been a high profile target of the Democrats from the get-go because she's always the vote. Like Gardner is just not notable enough to be the vote we're waiting on. Whereas Susan Collins is always the vote we're waiting on.
Yeah.
So, and Tom Tillis is like he's like a nobody who's also a somebody. Like he's like managed to get away with not ever being named in regards to any issue or anything.
Yeah.
The only seat that Democrats might and have a good chance of still losing is the seat in Alabama, Doug Jones' seat. That was a miraculous win when we won it, so that wouldn't be a shock. But if the Republicans lose Arizona, Colorado, North Carolina, and Maine, and only gain Alabama, we take back control of the Senate.
Right. If Biden wins.
If Biden wins. Yeah.
Right. Because that's the tiebreaker. And I would say it's interesting how this has changed, I think, a bit because. And to some degree, it also has depended on who sort of like, I don't think anybody thought Montana was in the mix until Steve Bullock decided that he would run. But, you know, I think that people sort of like, you know, 6-9 months ago sort of didn't really see a world where the Democrats had a good chance at getting the Senate back. It felt a little bit more like a long shot. But if this turns into a wave, which it very well could, like you've got to think that Montana is in play. Georgia has, I think, don't they have
two
a couple?
Seats.
They have 2 seats.
They have
including
two Senate
one
seats,
of them,
both Senate seats.
Right, including what's-her-face, who's got the insider trading issue is up, remember. Joni Ernst
Kelly
in
Loeffler.
Iowa, her approval ratings are underwater right now.
As they should be.
As they should be. Kansas has a Senate seat up right now. They just elected a Democratic governor in 2018.
Right.
So you're looking at a world where like, and look, I don't think this is going to happen, but like, you know, most of the experts think that at best it's going to be 51-49, and I would probably tend to agree with that. But like, if the floodgates open, it could be 53-47, or even potentially 54-46. I mean, if the cards fall right. I mean, there's been recent polls that have Amy McGrath very close to Mitch McConnell in Kentucky. There's been polls that have Lindsey Graham and Jamie Harrison very close in South Carolina. I don't necessarily think those guys are going to lose, but like, look, you know, I mean, if we all decide that everything is shit, which currently right now, which granted it's only April, is like, you know, I get why the Republicans are starting to get a little bit worried about their Senate majority, because
I'm shocked that they weren't worried before all of this. We still had a president who was impeached. Like, as much as we know that Trump's base is pretty solid, we really don't know what the rest of the traditional Republican voter bloc is going to be up to at this point. You know, they've already lost a lot of headway in areas like, you know, suburbs, like white suburbs, places where they had, you know, where Trump won sort of surprising victories. They've already lost a lot of headway in those places. And in a
those voters are
year,
gone.
we would
and they're
have
not coming back just to vote for him, because they left because of him.
Well, I was going to say, in a traditional year, we would see a kind of rebound for the Republicans because the Democrats did so well in the midterms. But because the Republicans haven't offered anything new or exciting to get those voters back with, aside from a permanent state of crisis that we just careen from, you know, back and forth from like from one crisis to another. There's not, I don't think, I mean, and look, as I said at the top of this, anything could change before then. Totally. Literally anything. And so I don't.
We could either be like in the midst of like a great economic rebound, or we could be entering well, we could be dead, or we could be entering the fall comeback of this also. You know?
I mean, there's like literally nothing we can know about it. So I think with that in mind, Democrats should consider it their responsibility to campaign as if they are in a losing race right now. Like, campaign as if they expect
their tendency is going to be to play it safe because they think they'll be able to get away with it.
Right. And that is a terrible tendency that they lose with constantly.
Yes.
And honestly, it was not what led to their 2018 victories.
No, it wasn't.
That was a bunch of people that weren't in their control, who were winning against incumbents and things like that, who kind of led the media charge that made those races competitive.
And running races, attempting to run competitive races in places where they probably wouldn't have even run competitive races. Certainly not in a midterm year prior.
Often running competitive primaries in those states first. I mean, the governor of New York right now is about to make, I think, the most foolhardy decision that he could make. They're going to announce it tomorrow, so we'll see what happens. But they are talking about taking Bernie Sanders' name off of the ballot for the New York State primary. New York State has not voted yet in their primary. Now, the primary ballot is determined by voters. It's not determined by candidates. Voters go and collect signatures to get these candidates on the ballot. So if we allow some executive authority to say that people can be removed from the ballot on the basis of everyone's personal preference for who should be on the ballot, even if there's a pandemic going on, we've just like handed Trump a reason that he can remove Joe Biden from the ballot if he's not, for excuses that have nothing to do with anything. Is Sanders not polling well in New York? Well, probably not, because he's dropped out of the race. But that doesn't, if that's your excuse for dropping him off the ballot, then what you've done is a disservice to voters, not to Sanders, because voters were the ones who got him on the ballot, not him. So I feel like that would create a dynamic in which we would have given Trump the impetus to cancel the November elections, and is a terrible idea. But my point is, back to my point, a lot of those 2018 victories were also driven by competitive primaries that got a lot of people into the process, and then they all worked together to get whoever got elected. And that's something the Democrats are about to give up in a lot of states, in part because it's going to be hard for people to vote, but also in part because they're actively choosing to in an effort to galvanize early. And that, I think, could make all of this advantage that they're being handed nothing. Nothing. You know, I think that's because we should still point out that Trump has vastly outraised Biden. That Biden is in hiding right now. And that also, we're about to kind of talk a little bit more about what Biden will be offering as an alternative, but he's still getting advice from people like Larry Summers. That's something that we talk about more. And
so maybe we've talked a couple of weeks ago about like how maybe Bloomberg's company was going to run his campaign.
Exactly. So, I mean, he may not be offering up a sort of proactive vision in the way that he really needs to campaign in a world in which his victory is not assured.
Yeah.
And so, anything could happen is what we're saying.
Yeah.
But it does look like the Republican Party is starting to see that Trump is creating a disadvantage for them, whereas, and it's an awkward situation because he was also the only outlet that he was the only kind of rock that they had. That's why they all decided to agree with him, as his fundraising and campaigning operation was so successful.
I know, and I think that the people who sort of like have been your sort of like more classic Republicans and sort of, the quote unquote never Trumpers, I think this has been a thing that they have worried about with him, is that, yes, he became the president and he sort of fires up a certain specific base, but like, does he sort of like end up completely ravaging your party in a way that sort of was maybe unexpected to some people, but should have been seen, or they think should have been seen anyway. And it seems like
the answer is yes.
It has the potential to do that, certainly.
That's the answer.
Yeah.
And it was also a pretty troubling week for Biden news.
Right.
And for a couple of reasons, for the left. Some of these should have been troubling to everyone, but certainly the left is troubled this week.
Yeah.
So we got a little bit more corroboration on the Tara Reade accusation. So we know last month, Tara Reade, who had worked in Biden's office in the 90s, accused him of sexually assaulting her.
Mm-hmm.
Not harassing her, which was her initial claim, but sexually assaulting her.
Right. Initially, she was one of the 8 women, I think, who had worked for him that claimed that he had that was like inappropriate touching, I think.
Right.
Ultimately.
But then she claimed that he penetrated her with his fingers.
Right.
So that's why that claim blew up. She tried to go to Time's Up. They wouldn't talk to her because they had affiliations with the Biden campaign, it turned out. She tried to go to Reporters. No one would talk to her.
They were afraid they were going to lose their 501c profit status. Like, if they got involved, because it was like a campaign issue at that point.
So she finally got, last month we finally got her story. And everyone's knock on her has been that everyone keeps saying that the only people who have corroborated it are her own family.
Right. Well, and this is
how you gaslight people into thinking women's voices aren't
what always happens. This is what happened with Christine Blasey Ford, was that it's like nobody knew, and like she had
why. So
it's like
there wasn't a police report of the incident, and also if they had one, they would have said, well, the police didn't witness it. So But so Tara Reade had said that she remembered that her mother called into Larry King Live and asked what someone in her situation should do.
She didn't remember when it was. She remembered it was in 1993, and she sort of like had some vague recollection, which ended up not being exactly what the call was, but like somebody found it.
Someone found it. So The Intercept released the video this week, and the video has an unidentified caller from San Luis Obispo, which is where she was from, that Tara Reade confirmed was her mother's voice, saying, I'm wondering what a staffer would do besides go to the press in Washington, after saying she'd had problems with her high-profile Senate boss.
Right.
My daughter has just left there after working for a prominent senator and could not get through with her problems at all. And the only thing she could have done was go to the press, and she chose not to do it out of respect for him.
Yeah.
So she doesn't specifically say that it's sexual harassment, although I would argue that in the 90s in Washington, you can make some assumptions.
Sure. We know what was going on.
I think Larry King reacts as if he understands what she means.
Right. And then actually, if you continue to watch the clip, the panel addresses this not at all.
Right.
And then carries on talking about something that is sort of like vaguely related to the question, but like also like not at all like giving this woman any advice or like talking like in any meaningful way about, sexual assault or, any women's issues or anything like that. So, which is not surprising.
Exactly. Trump is already having an exciting time tweeting about this. He tweeted on Friday about it a few times, and even tweeted, Joe Biden isn't sheltering in place in his basement bunker because of the pandemic. He's hiding from Tara Reade. So he's going to have a field day with this, which is unfortunate because he's such a worse abuser. But I have a theory about what's happened here.
Well, and I think the problem for Biden is that he did this, or maybe did it. Like, that's the big problem. But more broadly, I think that they were banking on this going away and sort of like only existing on sort of like the left-wing dark webs.
Right.
Which is where it had been until this week. I mean, it had not been anywhere other than The Intercept, who was sort of on top of the story at all. So, and on Twitter, of course, because everything's on Twitter. But this week, we pulled the notes for the story from the article that was in Politico on this.
Exactly.
So this call to Larry King is not a good look for Joe Biden. I mean, it's worse than not a good look.
I also have another theory about why this is bad for him, which is, I think, and this is not a, this is, I don't respect that this is how we're reacting to these stories, but I think what's happened with the Trump accusations is that people have discounted them in large part because they were women who were around Donald Trump. They were the kind of women who would have been in Donald Trump's presence. And as much as that's not an acceptable reason to not give someone, not take somebody's accusation of sexual assault or sexual harassment seriously, but I think that's what like Americans' minds have done. I think the difference here is that we have someone more in the kind of like Chandra Levy mold. We have somebody who actually is doing all the things you're supposed to do to be a success and respected woman. She's going and working in a prominent senator's office. This is the 90s in DC, which is a time that we know is particularly violent for women. And so I think that it's foolish of them to think that this story won't resonate differently than the Trump accusations just because there's more Trump accusations. Because I think that this is exactly the kind of story that in 2001, we would have lost our minds over.
Sure. I think that makes sense.
Time, so and we're in a time where we've backed ourselves into a terrible corner. And why are the Democrats putting us in this situation? Yeah. They fucking served with this guy in the 90s. They knew his deal. I knew his deal. So they definitely knew his deal. So they knew that there were possibilities like this on the horizon, and they knew what kind of environment they were running in. I'm like livid that we have galvanized around somebody with this kind of a skeleton, because what does this say to Democratic women when we are going to be asked, why did you agree to vote for him if you don't think this kind of behavior is okay? And we're going to have to say, oh, well, I guess his rape was better than the other guy's rape. Like, I mean, what are we left
Totally. And this is that's the argument that we've seen spilling out, at least only on Twitter right now. But you've seen, Rose McGowan and, what's her name? Sorry.
Did Jessica Valenti wrote something?
Alyssa Milano, right? Have been having it out on Twitter over this because, I think Alyssa Milano said something to the effect of like, I know him, he's a good guy, which is sort of like the classic response to,
that's what you say when you don't want to admit that someone had sexually harassed somebody.
And I think that like this specifically, I agree with everything that you just said, and this incident specifically should be enough where we should sort of be thinking about whether he should be the nominee. But I think in addition to that, I think it's sort of like, it just adds to a picture that sort of had already been formed about Joe Biden. Again, going back to your point about like how people knew this, but like, we knew that he had people, we had sort of like, for a long time thought it was hilarious that he was just like inappropriately massaging people while he was swearing people in as vice president. And, like that's a thing that we sort of
Creepy
like
we
wrote that off at the time. But we also know how he treated Anita Hill. We know, so it's sort of, it's like another feather in the cap, basically. It's like it adds to like a bigger narrative about him that without this, I think he could have probably pretended didn't exist. And I think everybody would have gone along like to a degree. But this is such a specific thing that there seems to be evidence of, that I think it's sort of like, it flags all of those other things and make them more real.
Having a dog situation here in my building, if you can hear this.
I can.
Yeah. Little, our sound studio has been invaded by dogs. In any case, I feel like this, as much as like we maybe, the narrative wouldn't have developed this way if it weren't for the Tara Reade accusation, I don't think that we can say as voters that we didn't know. Because that was one of the first things we knew about him when he started to run. I mean, remember how much we talked about Anita Hill just recently because of Christine Blasey Ford. So we were quite familiar with that line of questioning that kind of broadcast his contempt for women. And so I just think like there's, at the point that we are now sort of seeing that this is a long narrative that is going to not serve us well, I can't believe that, knowing what we all knew before, that Democrats were put in this situation by Democratic leadership, by other Democrats, sort of livid at everyone. And I don't take responsibility for any of this because I obviously have been furious at Biden for a long time.
No.
But I also think this is asking a lot of us.
I agree. And this is going to be another thing that like everybody's going to attempt to gaslight us on.
Yeah.
Because they're going to like, if this turns into a situation, then everybody's going to be like, oh, well, you know, we just didn't know. It's like, well, you did.
Right.
You didn't know about this, but you knew generally.
You knew enough.
Like, we're going to find, you know, I'm already picturing all of the people saying that we didn't know that he was like, you know, mentally compromised, which
Right.
like, it's like, well, you've watched television, so I know that you know better. Like, there's going to be a whole laundry list of things that like, we're going to be told that like, oh, well, you know, we just didn't know. And it's like, yeah, you fucking did. You knew
little
everything.
Crocodile tears from people who knew and then forgot. Yeah. Brent and I have taken our own oath.
Oh yeah, we should talk about that.
Yes, and I want to, before we do, I want to shout out to my mother, Carla, who's been way on the we knew better than Biden train for a while.
She has.
She's been making her friends crazy, but she's doing it. She's doing the work.
Right. She wrote a dropout Biden blog before it was trending on
Twitter. Right.
Yeah.
But so we have decided, and this was something that independently my mother and I discussed, and Brent then called me and was like, you know what I'm going to do this time? And I was like, we're all in. We did it.
Right. I know. Your mom emailed me her blog seconds after you and I were texting. So I know that you obviously texted her. And
I texted her and told her that you had just
I'm glad we're all on the same page.
Independently come to the same conclusion.
Right.
But we're not going to take responsibility for this one. We're in the you break it, you bought it territory. If Joe Biden loses the nomination loses the presidency for the Democratic Party because they shoved him down our throats, that is not the left's fault. Do not blame the left for not showing up. Do not blame the left for not campaigning hard enough. Do not blame the left for anything. That is your responsibility as moderates. That's on you.
Right. You did this. You all did it. And it was a calculated effort. It was very carefully done. It involved everyone who ran for president. It involved past presidents. It involved
maybe too much.
It involved careful movements of parts and pieces. And like, you got what you wanted. And if he can't do it, then you don't get to come for me for voting for whoever I voted for.
That's right.
Certainly not in California. You don't get to do that anyway. But
you don't get to do that no matter what for anyone anywhere. We would argue, but especially,
but I am not having it.
Not entertaining this.
You know, I haven't been listening to it for the last 3 years anyway. But like, when you hear it on an almost daily basis, like, it starts to grate on you. Yeah. And I'm not having it.
This is not on the
left. I've already told multiple people who like to tell me this, that like, look, like, do I hope Biden becomes the president? Like, if those are our two choices, sure.
Right, of course.
He doesn't, and I voted for fucking Howie Hawkins, whoever I end up voting for, like, then you don't get to come for me.
No. And that's, we have put up with years of gaslighting about this related to the Clinton campaign, because we might remind you that Brent and I wrote a piece in 2013 about why Clinton would be a bad fit for a presidential candidate. All of the liabilities that she brought to the table. And all of those turned out to be problematic for her, including some new liabilities that we hadn't thought of. And this was not a piece that was meant to be a hit piece on Hillary Clinton. This is not meant to say that she's not like a smart woman. This is not meant to say that she has not tried to dedicate her life to public service. This was a piece that was specifically about why strategically she brought the wrong things to the table. And that was in 2013. And that was when we first realized, I think, that they were going to shove her down our throats as king. Right. And we're just, that's not gonna fly with us again. It didn't fly with us the first time, but it flew with a lot of people that we knew. And this
I didn't see
we're
it
coming in hot. This year, we are not letting our friends feel the way that they were, that people made them feel after the Clinton election.
No,
because I have so many friends who voted for her who still got blamed for her not winning.
Oh yeah,
because
right, yeah, it's not happening.
My mother. That's why my mother is so livid. If you want to know why my mother's livid, it's because she voted for Hillary Clinton and she felt crap about the choice because she had always said she'd never vote for somebody who voted for the Iraq War ever again.
Yeah. And
so she had to violate her principles to do that. And then Clinton lost. And what did all of her moderate friends do? They turned around and blamed her.
Right.
Or I don't know what.
She didn't go door knocking or something? Or
no, not even, because she at times had doubts about, about her candidacy. it
Right,
was
because she's a
literally,
person who can read.
my mom was
I mean,
there handing out signs for her, for
yeah,
lawn signs and stuff like that. I mean, she was doing the work, and she still got blamed after it. That's why she won't be reasoned with right now.
yeah.
And I'm not going to call it reasoned, but she's right to be not
Right,
reasonable.
yeah, I was going to say. It sounds like she's being unreasonable, and she's being completely
She's
reasonable.
being very reasonable. You don't get to gaslight us twice.
Yeah.
You
Nope.
break it, you bought it.
Yep.
It is now on moderates to convince me that this is not a violation of my principles to make this choice.
Yep.
And the question is not who is more evil. The question is who is not evil. I mean, the question can't just be, well, Trump is terrible.
Right.
The question has to be that we also recognize that as part of our constituency, we have been using and abusing the left. We have assumed that your vote belongs to us and then been blaming you when we don't get it. So we now know that we owe you something.
Yep.
What is it that we owe you? That's what you can buy my vote with.
Yep.
In any case.
And I'm certainly not going to be any more excited to vote for Joe Biden if he's got Larry Summers advising him on economic policy.
You guys, Larry Summers has been somebody that, first of all, if you wonder why it is that it seems like every Democratic president has this weird sort of affinity for Reaganomics style solutions to things and weird affinity for Reagan himself, it is because of Larry Summers, basically. Yeah. Larry Summers
he's in every administration,
advising every administration.
He advises everybody.
From Reagan on. And he's the guy, he's the reason that our bailout in 2008 was just of giant corporations. He's the reason that the Democrats are busy promoting, I mean, his thinking is what has infected the Democratic Party with this pro-corporate thinking that has led to them voting for these horrendous bailout measures that we've been seeing, because we are now on our fourth bailout package, and we've seen $1,200 for regular people and not much else.
Yep.
And then we now have learned that the Biden campaign is taking is having him as an outside advisor.
Yeah.
Which Larry Summers needed to go years ago, but Larry Summers is not the guy for this moment. He cannot meet this.
He cannot. And this is one thing where I think, we're going to talk about a story that I suppose is probably the closest thing to a positive story that we're going to get to about Joe Biden, next.
Right.
But I think that it sort of goes back to our conversation last week about sort of how far he could be pushed and whether it would be enough. But Justice Democrats and the Sunrise Movement started a petition on Friday, which I signed. I would implore all of you to sign.
Right. Everyone should sign it.
But this is I could see a world where Joe Biden is look, you're right. I don't need Larry Summers right now.
Right.
He barely has an internal policy team, which I learned this week, which is hilarious. So I think that there is a world where if the voice is loud enough in Joe Biden's ear in the time that we're in right now, he could potentially take this note.
Yeah.
And maybe he won't. I don't know. But
there's also a world. The problem is, without getting the note, there's a world in which he tries to make Larry Summers the head of the Federal Reserve, which the Obama, which is something that the Obama administration, or not the Obama administration, the Obama administration tried in 2013, right? That and it was progressives that took him down. But it was Liz Warren basically who tanked that nomination.
Right.
But, I mean, the Obama administration tried to make this man the head of the Federal Reserve. So, and that's because of that's because of the Biden relationship with him, because Obama sort of came in as not knowing anything, So the Biden campaign was contacted about this. They tried to downplay Summers' role,
the importance
saying, we consult a lot of people. But the thing is, and I think this gets back to my point about their, the supposed task forces that they're assembling. If your task force about what to do about the financial crisis includes Larry Summers, then you have not offered an olive branch to the left.
Right.
Because you're not, at that point, you've zeroed out
unless the Sanders policy team literally just ends Larry Summers.
Right. But I mean, once he's at the table, you're giving his voice equal weight to the other voices. And Larry Summers is somebody who has been incredibly influential for generations at this point, but for years and years, for decades is the word I was trying to use. And he's somebody who is, he's very against Medicare for all. He's against wealth taxes. He's against a lot of the proposals that the left is after right now. In a really aggressive way.
Right. He's got deep ties to Wall Street, to Silicon Valley. It's, I mean, he's not the guy.
he's the guy who bails out big financial institutions.
Yeah.
And so I think, when you have a guy like that who also at the table, and he's a guy that has all these former respectable titles,
Yeah.
because the table is going to be people who have never been given a voice in government, hopefully, people who are in favor of Medicare for all, who have not been at the table, and then people like Larry Summers who come in as having served 4 presidents. Like, that's not a table that comes to a good conclusion.
No.
So in any case, this is we're just going to have to slowly chip away at Biden's insights.
I think that's what we're going to have to do. I sort of I got excited actually when I read that he didn't have a deep in-house policy team.
Right.
Which it made perfect sense because he hasn't had any deep policies. So of course he doesn't. You would think that maybe they would have been some people employed on his staff that were doing that.
He's been running for president for over a year. What is he doing?
Right. And also for 12 years. Or no, 30 years, 30-some years.
Right, exactly.
So, but I think to a degree, if there's not someone staffed on his team that knows what they think about a specific subject, then you might be able to
get someone in there.
As you said, we might be able to inception him to thinking that some of these ideas were he had a dream one night and realized that, he wanted Medicare for all. I don't think that's going to happen, but
we can try.
I think more so than Clinton was.
Yeah.
He's a little bit more, not just open, but I think he's a little bit less. I don't think that he always thinks that he's the smartest person in the room. I think he
disagree.
Oh, well, I don't.
I think he is more inceptionable though, because he hasn't started with. I don't think, but I think that there's a way in which Clinton thought she was the smartest person in the room. She's a wonk. He's not a wonk.
No, he's not a wonk.
That's
really what you're right. That's what I meant.
Because he's a man who's tried to take credit for everything from Liz Warren's ideas to, he thinks he's He thinks he's responsible for everything good that's ever happened in America.
But he's not going to sit down.
And he can't apologize when he's wrong.
He's not going to sit down pen to paper and write a bunch of, one sheets about policy or, white papers or whatever the fuck.
Yeah, no, exactly.
About policy. That's not what he's up to.
No, certainly not, because as we've seen, he has failed to produce much in the way of white sheets or any other significant policy documents.
Yeah, right.
So I think he's also a man who is currently, first of all, I think sees himself as kind of like a mediator, as more than a principled person.
I think you're right.
And so I think that is something that we can, I think there is a way to inception him that wasn't available to us with Clinton, because Clinton was very self-assured about her own policy chops and also saw herself as very distinctly belonging to one wing of the Democratic Party. And while Biden, I would argue, belongs to one wing of the Democratic Party very distinctly, I don't know that he sees himself that way, because I think that he thinks that he's all things to all people.
Yeah.
And so I think there is a way to convince him that being all things to all people requires some changes, that he's not going to take a moral stand, against anything. And not that you can take a moral stand in favor of big business, but but so he's been doing some kind of bizarre messaging, which is, he gave this interview to Politico this week where he goes on about needing to have basically like a Green New Deal recovery style program.
They called it a very fiery interview. Politico, I think, was quoted as calling it, and I was just like, wait, what?
Well, I also feel like sometimes he gets really worked up because he's confused. We've seen him get angry and flustered and then lash out. So I wonder how much of this was that version of policy discussion, because think about all the mean things he said to voters who were questioning him.
Yeah.
He has a tendency to kind of, he loses his temper.
Yeah, he does.
So maybe he was fiery because he was kind of like worked up in his own
Did he call conversation. Did he call the interviewer a dog-faced pony soldier?
Right. He said that the next round of coronavirus funding needs to be a lot bigger. We just passed,
bigger than the first one, which was $2 trillion.
The $2 trillion, not the new one, which is just sort of re-upping the Paycheck Protection Act. But so he also said it should include aid to states. That's been a sticking point because Mitch McConnell wants all states to declare bankruptcy because he can fuck all the way off. And then he also said that he wants to include aid to states and cities in part to prevent them from laying off public employees.
Yeah, and that was a big statement, although everybody pretty much agrees with that, but it was interesting that he decided to add that in there because it was really the first time that he had spoken out against something that had been passed by the Democratic House, because in that bill, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes, it does not include that money for state and local governments. And granted, the Democrats wanted it in there, but they didn't get it. So you're sort of starting to see Biden feel like maybe it's okay for him to be, at least on this subject, a little bit further to the left, and also sort of, you know, nobody's going to love a criticism of Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer from the left more than the left.
That's right.
You know,
that's so true.
So he seems to be. I think he's on to something just with messaging there anyway. Because when I read this, I was like, "Hello, thank you, somebody."
Right. No, exactly.
You know?
No, that's. I think that is maybe what I've even been thinking he is. What's been missing from his lack of a presence in the conversation at all is that I think his desire not to criticize Chuck and Nancy's, work on this, because they're dealing with irrational, crazy people. And we all know that. And I think he's been hesitant to kind of criticize them because he knows how difficult it is to negotiate these kinds of things. But I think it gives him almost no way to message to people about what he would do differently.
Yeah.
And
well, that's the thing that, like he really should be leading this. I realize he's stuck in his basement and like he's not in one of the legislative bodies right now, but like to a degree we have decided, I mean, not enough of us have decided because not enough people have voted, but like, we have decided
the DNC has decided
the DNC has decided that he is he is now the de facto leader of the party. He is our and like, so we need this type of messaging from him. Like, we are going to have to pass another stimulus bill. I think everybody knows it. Even the one that they just passed this week, they were calling an interim bill. The Republicans are going to fight you on it, but like, why not listen to your fucking presidential nominee who says that it needs to be bigger than the first one? Because guess what? He's actually right for once.
Right. So the thing that he's been doing, though, I think he sees himself as some great stimulus negotiator, and that's why he's waded into this, because he kept going on about the Recovery Act from 2009.
Totally.
That he was integral to negotiating.
Right, which was chump change in
which was
like amount of money, but
chump change. And also, he keeps going on about how his other criticism of the current stimulus packages is that they don't have enough oversight. But so he keeps touting this bill that did nothing for regular people, for having great oversight. So basically, we watched our oversight. Our oversight was just. We
just made sure that $800 billion
billions of dollars
went to the right corporations.
Exactly. Like, he was saying about this bill, whoa, this is just a giveaway to corporate America. And our bill, we worked really hard to give it really, serious oversight. But like, and then was going on about how little fraud there was. But like, he's mostly just mad that it seemed like that the stimulus doesn't include oversight, so that we can make sure that the money that we're funneling to corporations isn't used for the wrong things within the corporations. But he's not advocating for like any specific fixes for regular people. He's just like really proud of this bill that did nothing for regular people because it had great oversight, so we could watch over it as it went, as the money disappeared out of our hands. So I don't know who he thinks the audience for that conversation is at the moment, but I would contend that that's maybe not a winning talking point. Like, I agree. Fraud talking points are Republican talking points, by the way. We dealt with this a lot with the VCF. The Republicans would go on and on and on about the reason that they wanted to just take it slow because they needed to make sure that, and there was no documented fraud in the program. And the program still has no documented fraud. And the whole time we had to be like, what are you talking about? There's no fraud in the program. And they just kept being like, but what about potential fraud? And the reason that Rand Paul and Mike Lee voted against it was theoretically because, what about fraud? And so that talking point is a conservative talking point.
Yeah.
And his pride at making sure there was no fraud in a program that funneled money directly to corporations is like not for me a winning talking point. But that's just
I agree.
That's just me.
He did get a little bit deeper sort of like on some of what he would spend a larger stimulus on. I agree with you completely. But he sort of like did like dig into some things. I mean, he didn't offer like a plan, a big, like a specific plan, obviously, but he did suggest at least $1 trillion for an infrastructure program that can be implemented really rapidly, and he wanted that to be green things
specifically. And that would be a great idea and a great use of this moment.
Yeah, exactly. And he said that investments in light rail, clean drinking water, 500,000 electric vehicle chargers on our highways could help retool the economy for the future. That was his quote on that. So I do think that, again, we got a long way to go, and he's not all the way there.
Right.
We've got more inceptioning to do.
Yes.
But like, this is not nothing.
He did also have a folksy saying about the Trump tax cut, because he was saying that we need to repeal that, which he's also not wrong about.
Yeah.
He said that it wasn't worth the powder it will take to blow it to hell.
Ooh, dramatic, so dramatic.
The folksy saying from Joe Biden.
God, it's folksy and also like definitely evokes something.
Politico's article about the interview, though, did also have a sort of classic Joe Biden descriptive moment where it said, Biden has loved talking about stimulus ever since he ran the Recovery Act, and he sounded comfortable returning to the topic from his Delaware home, although there were a couple of typically hard to follow tangents and one brief coughing interruption that he attributed to swallowing a peanut the wrong way. That sort of perfect. Biden did denounce corporate America as greedy as hell.
Sure.
I think that, and he wants, as many of us do, the small business loans to be given to actual small businesses. I would contend that you can do more than just give loans to people when you've taken away their ability to make money.
Yeah.
And some, the loan program is a grant if you use it for payroll and certain, mortgage interest in certain things. But I feel like his specifics were still calling for the sort of bailing out of the employer instead of the employee. And I think we're sort of past the point where we bail out employers. And I mean, we're not past the point where we bail out small employers. We're past the point where that's enough. Yeah. Because when 26 million people no longer are employees, you need to do more. And those are just the people that could get into the system.
Right.
Those are people that many of whom have not yet seen a dime of assistance, have been out of work for over a month and have not seen any assistance yet. Then, I think his comfort speaking of just employer-based stimulus measures is kind of concerning to me in this moment, where this is very different than 2008 because it's so swift.
Totally.
And it's there's a health crisis component of it, so there's more to lose. It's not just about money.
Right. He did say that he hopes that this would convince Americans that grocery clerks and all the other folks out there saving our rear ends and risking their lives out there for $8 an hour deserve a better deal. And while I'm glad that he said that, that doesn't fix what you were just talking about, because those are people who, while they should be getting paid more, they should be getting hazard pay, they should be getting time and a half, they should be getting all of those, they should have better health insurance, they should have all of those things. But with all due respect, they are also people who still have jobs right now.
So I mean,
they're not getting paid enough, but I mean, like, they're at least getting the pennies that they're getting while so many people are out of work right now.
Yeah. So I feel like he's sort of inching closer.
Right. Well, I think a lot of people are
his most fiery. He's not there yet.
The one thing that I will say that gives me hope that he will get there is that it seems like a lot of people are getting there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, like, we've heard so many people, and whether it was lip service or not, I mean, I felt like in that Obama video, he was sort of setting the stage for this type of thinking. And like, I've been thinking a lot about it because, like, you and I have talked and like, so much about this, like that. And I feel like to a degree it started with Clinton, but it started sort of before that for Democrats. I mean, Carter to a degree, but I mean, like, we have really sort of like for so long shied away from like the government being able to do good things.
Yeah.
And like, I think that we are now seeing, and so many people are seeing there was an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal today about how the era of big government had to come back.
Yeah.
So these are, and that is those are conservatives at the Wall Street Journal editorial board. I don't know what I was trying to say.
You were setting yourself up to say no slouches, but they are slouches when it comes to thinking critically about things, but they are conservative.
I feel like if Democrats, the party that supposedly already thinks that government can do good things and should work for people and should help people in their lives, doesn't take this opportunity to really say, look, we fucking told you, and like
Right.
really latch on to ideas that show that government can do these things. I mean, guys, like
Yeah.
we can't let this pass us by. I mean, as terrible as this time is, this is it right here.
This is the
Like
moment.
if you're a Democrat, you should have been built for this. Right now.
Exactly. This is the moment that big government thinking becomes a necessity.
Yeah.
And big government can also work.
Yeah.
This is why those of us who believe big government works believe it, because in eras like this, when the response has been bigger government, it's worked.
Right.
So, and that is not an era any of us have lived through personally, unfortunately, but that is what the whole philosophy of big government is.
Yeah.
The House has passed, we said, a new
their interim bill.
Interim paycheck protection program.
Because I think we talked last week or maybe the week before, I can't remember, that all of that money ran out.
Right.
They had initially allotted, I think, $350 billion for it, and it was gone in like seconds.
But this new bill still doesn't, it's missing some important priorities that the Democrats wanted to have in it, including like additional money for SNAP and things like that. But also it doesn't really stop the main problem, which was huge corporations applying for all the money for different franchises and then getting millions of dollars and causing the program to run out of money before small businesses could actually be helped by it. And AOC actually voted against it.
Right. And I think she had a great quote about it. I think what she said, if we're going to say that this new bill is going to give us $5 and then Congress is going to peace out for another month-long recess, I'm here to say it's not going to help our communities.
Yeah. She's right.
So. And it's not.
Not.
She's right.
Meanwhile, some states have just started opening up again, because why not? Even though the federal guidance said that you had to be on a downward trajectory for 2 weeks. None of these states have been, by the way.
No.
They just decided they're bored of this.
That's exactly what they've decided. I mean, and look, and they've also decided that they don't care about science, which is no shock because one of these states is Georgia. And I mean,
Brian Kemp has been clear he doesn't care or know about science.
I mean, that's a man who learned not long ago that you could be contagious if you weren't showing symptoms of coronavirus. Right. So like, this is a man who is actively ignoring science. So, it's no shock that he wants everybody to go to the gym.
That's right. Georgia's stay-at-home order technically expires on April 30th. Yeah. But they announced that they're going to allow some businesses to reopen. That is going to include things that would be possible disease vectors like hair salons and gyms.
Yeah.
But there was an article somewhere about the gym lobby. Like there was a huge gym lobby. That is why gyms is on this list. Gyms is like a logical thing to not put on this list. Why would you need gyms are not even halfway essential. They're not even people need haircuts right now. They don't fucking need to go to the gym. Right. But gyms apparently lobbied hard to be included in that first wave in the federal guidance. And that is why gyms are allowed in all of these early opening things, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Can you think of an easier place to get coronavirus than a gym?
No.
Mayors weren't happy. Atlanta's mayor, Bottoms.
Yeah, Keisha Lance Bottoms, yeah.
Not happy.
Right. She was telling everybody to like continue to stay home.
She was just like stay home. Yeah.
Once she has no authority to tell people to do that, it sort of becomes hard. Yeah. And there was footage of people go. I mean, I saw people getting haircuts in Georgia on Friday.
That's right.
So they weren't listening to her, unfortunately.
Right. Some other states are loosening restrictions too. Oklahoma, which Oklahoma has fewer cases than Georgia. However, Oklahoma is still on the upswing curve-wise. Oklahoma has not even gotten to the top of the curve yet.
No.
And so they started to open hair salons and nail salons and other personal care businesses on Friday, along with state parks. They allowed hospitals to resume elective surgeries. They are, again, still on the rise. Their case counts are still on the rise. And in fact, in all of these states, these are all states that are still in the wrong part of the curve to be the ones opening.
Some of them are doing better than others, and we'll get to that in just a second. But like most of them are not doing well at all, including Georgia, certainly.
No, and also some of them are likely only doing well because the entire country shut down, making it difficult for an outbreak to happen.
Right.
But Tennessee said on Monday that most of their businesses are going to reopen on April 30th, and they were one of the last states to issue a stay-at-home order.
Yeah.
The thing is, it could be that the pandemic just hasn't gotten there yet. I mean, there are cases in Tennessee.
Right.
Like what we saw in New York, where it was like, it seemed like no big deal. And then all of a sudden there were tens of thousands of cases. That could happen anywhere.
Well, and that's what has happened. We've seen that happen
Right.
in like a lot of the places that ended up
Wisconsin.
being right. I was going to say a lot of the places that ended up being hotspots were not places that people thought were going to be hotspots, but they just
Exactly.
happened to get some cases, and then all of a sudden you're a hotspot.
Right. It's like if your small town gets one case, then like good luck because you probably all go to church together. Like then your whole town gets coronavirus.
Right.
Mississippi is going to lift some stay-at-home orders. Then they're going to have a safer at home
right
order.
Well, and this I feel like goes back to a conversation that you and I were having yesterday, sort of like
Yes.
about the confusion of all of this. And after looking through all of these lists of states and what it is that they're doing, I feel like I'm a little bit more sort of on your side on this. Lila and I got into a bit of a debate yesterday as to whether people should know better, as to whether they are doing sort of like certain things that like I felt like they should know better, and sort of like took to policing some people on the internet yesterday. And Lila was like, well, everybody is confused. And I was like, but people know not to go to a birthday party, but maybe they fucking don't.
I feel like given what
like you can't tell people to go home in one breath and then open up all the state parks in the next breath.
Exactly. And like you can't call your orders 1,000 complicated things because we already have a safer at home order. Our safer at home order is a stay at home order. What does safer at home mean in Mississippi?
Right. What's the difference between a stay at home order and a safer at home order when all of the businesses are opening?
Right. Exactly. Like, what does any of this mean?
Right. What do people in Atlanta do when your mayor wants you to stay home? And like, but you also need a haircut.
You know, I mean, my cousin lives in Oklahoma, and that's something she talked about where they were told in the town that she lives in to stay home, but the state's opening. And they're like, well, I don't know what we're supposed to do. Like, what are we supposed to think about this? Texas is allowing some stores to open at reduced capacity, and people have to wear face masks, but their stay at home order is, their state parks reopened earlier this week. Colorado says that they are going to move from stay at home to safer at home, where they're just going to recommend that people stay home.
Right, which is like, come on.
What does that even mean? Yeah, exactly. And what they're finding in Georgia, by the way, is that as much as some people rushed out immediately to go get haircuts, people actually don't want to go shopping.
Well, that's the thing. We've seen
people didn't want to leave their homes.
Right. We've seen the polls on this. Like, I think it's
no one's
just
going
shy
out.
of like 70% of people think that these are going to be lifted too early. So people are scared to go out.
Yeah. So I think you're going to get the downside where your case count's going to go up, but you're not going to get the upside of businesses actually getting improved business.
Yeah.
Like, people aren't going to be able to stay in business just because you lifted a stay-at-home order on nail salons if only 30% of their customer base is willing to come back, and then also all of their employees get coronavirus and then they have to close again. Like, that you sort of have the worst of both worlds.
Right.
With these half lifted things. Alaska is going to start allowing restaurants and retail to open on Friday.
Yeah, they have to follow health mandates though.
Montana is doing a phased reopening starting Sunday. Churches are going to be allowed to reopen.
Yeah.
And restaurants are going to be allowed to reopen.
We've seen church outbreaks. Like,
that's all of South Korea basically got it in a fucking church outbreak.
Right, yeah.
The whole country's coronavirus count can be attributed to one woman's visit to church. So like, I can't with these churches.
Right.
Church is one place. Listen, I've learned from Brent that a lot of churches are doing online services. And I think that's a great idea because some people want to listen to a boring church service on Sunday morning, and that's their choice. But there are going to be thousands of churches doing services online for the rest of the year. So watch one of those. You'll be able to find a church that fits your specific needs and whatever crazy pants beliefs you have. It's going to be fine. There will be someone, if you believe everyone's going to burn in hell, a church online will give you that information as well. But like,
for sure.
That's easy. But I mean, just like, don't go into a physical church right now.
Yeah.
Use your head.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you brought up South Korea, actually, because I think that's important to sort of like get into the next part of this story, because the reason that we know that basically all of those South Korea cases came from one case was because of the intense contact tracing that they were doing in South Korea, which we are not doing. We would have no way of knowing
the thing you need.
Right, exactly. And that is sort of like, as all of these states sort of like declare when they're going to start reopening, the thing that you need is sort of like massive amounts of testing, more testing than we're doing. And like that level of contact tracing where you can trace back an entire country to one person. We don't have either of those things right now. And we are probably not going to get to a place where we're ever sort of have those things because we're fucked. That being said, there are some new sort of ways that places are looking at when states can reopen based on some different things, and it's basically, it involves math. Look, guys,
it
and I
involves
don't do that.
Your case count for new infections below a certain rate, basically.
Right, exactly. That's exactly what it is. Right, and like
to summarize the math,
and how much each state could take, like, to if they relaxed those to like not see an outbreak, like if they got below a certain point, basically. And so per that, those estimations, those models, some of the states that we just talked about above, some of them are actually maybe on track, but most of them are way far off, because as you mentioned, some of them are still on the up slope of the curve. Montana and Alaska are estimated to be able to sort of like loosen some of these things on May 6th and May 7th. So they're actually sort of like not
a week early.
So they're
too
like
early, but not egregious.
Right. And Tennessee is May 20th, which again,
well, think about how quickly though an outbreak can happen. The difference between May 20th and May 1st is pretty big.
Right. And just that, like, in the scope of like some of these other states that we're going to read and what their dates are, like they're closer to like being right anyway. But you're right. It can spread so fast. It's like if you jump it by 2 days, then like you could potentially.
You could exponentially grow the case count to the point where you are suddenly New York.
Yeah, exactly. Colorado is May 26th. Mississippi is May 29th. Texas, not until June 8th. Oklahoma, not until June 17th. And Georgia, not until June 22nd.
It's cute.
They're
really
open.
Cute, Georgia.
Georgia's open.
That's right. They have 2 more months to go before they can open safely, according to even a metric that ignores the metrics that we are trying to, the metrics that we know work, where contact tracing and testing are available.
Yeah, exactly. By the way, California, May 18th on that list.
Right on target for our current.
Killing it. Right, we're up until May 18th is when our order ends.
Order, I think, is May 15th, right?
Yeah, 15th. That's what I meant. Yeah.
I think they're going to extend it, though.
I think they're going to extend it, assuming that we sort of like stay on the track that we are, just to be safe. Probably just until, is it Memorial Day or Labor Day that happens in May? Memorial Day, right? Which I think isn't that toward the end of the month?
Labor Day is the end of summer.
Yeah,
so I hope they don't extend it till Labor Day.
No, I hope not.
But Memorial Day is at the end of
May.
Because
I feel like that sort of like also gives you just sort of like a date. Like, let's just like also. I
would caution them to extend it 1 day past Memorial Day, because Memorial Day is a big barbecue day.
Right, exactly. So everybody is like not at the beach that day.
Right, because the last thing you need is for everyone to get it because the first day back was a holiday, and so we all went to parties together.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, and I'm sure they're going to do a phased sort of
reopening
anyway. But
so in any case, the other weird dynamic that's been going on federally this week is the Mitch McConnell drop dead to states, where he basically was like, states should consider filing for bankruptcy instead of coming to the federal government for money. We're not here to give financial aid to a bunch of blue states. I mean, he literally made it about blue states too. It was like about blue states bail out a bunch of blue states. And so Andrew Cuomo, knowing what many of us know on the blue state side, kind of lost his shit, rightfully, because do you want to know what state is pays more money out, the most money out? What's the way of phrasing this, Brent? Pays so much, pays the most of the money, pays more money. No, but they pay the most out versus what they get back. New York State pays the most out versus what they get back of any state. So New York State is the biggest donor state in the country. They're putting in more than they're getting back. By the largest margin in the country. By the largest margin. So they're the biggest donor state in the country. I think California is the second biggest donor state in the country. Yeah. In any case. Kentucky, third biggest. Taker state. Donee state. Right. Welfare state is what we'll call it. Yeah, exactly. Kentucky receives something like 40% of its funding from money it did not pay out in taxes, which means that New York State is covering Kentucky's bills and has been bailing out Kentucky on an ongoing basis forever. Yeah, he got really worked up about this. I saw it. I mean, this is something that in blue states we get worked up about, because I've gotten worked up about this in the past, and I know I've gotten worked up about it here. But if a bunch of people from donors or from welfare states want to come at us and tell us that we should go declare bankruptcy because we don't deserve any federal aid when we have a crisis. They tried this after Sandy too. I remember this conversation after Sandy because they wanted to hold up federal aid because it was just for New York, and New York was like, give us back our own money then. Right, and that's exactly what he said. And that's what Andrew Cuomo said. Yeah, he said, like, okay, go ahead. Give me my money back, Senator. Yeah, that's I mean, I think this is a dumb move on McConnell's part for a reason that I will now say, which is I don't know why gave that such a dramatic intro, but the coastal states are forming sort of regional alliances right now in order to help manage the pandemic response efforts. So, the entire West Coast is going to manage their opening together. And and New England, Mid-Atlantic states are also in a pact to work together. So we have already set the stage for these mini nation states to exist within our country. And all of these mini nation states are donor states. There are very few of these states that are in these coalitions now that don't give more money to the federal government than they receive back in terms of funding. And if I were them, I would say we're not about to donate to a federal government that won't provide us the security that a federal government is supposed to provide. So this whole coalition of states is going to keep the money this year. Right. Enjoy your lives, Kentucky.
Yeah. Well, and I also think it's a dangerous game for him to play too, because I think that in the time that we're in right now, I think, as you mentioned, this is the thing that you have complained about. It's the thing that I have complained about, living in California. This is not a thing that I think a lot of people have a very clear understanding of. Yeah. And I think that he just sort of allowed people to have that clear understanding. Yes. I saw multiple people, I saw round tables. I saw, well, not tables because nobody on CNN is at a table currently.
Round
screens of people explaining this, the nuts and bolts of this, and what states give what and what it means, and what Andrew Cuomo was talking about, and sort of explaining the whole thing. And it's not actually even legal for states to file for bankruptcy right now. So McConnell would have to.
Right. So what was he even offering?
Cuomo said, he was I dare you to, he dared him, literally. Yeah. I dare you to pass a bill that allows me to vote for bankruptcy, or to declare bankruptcy. So I think that he put this out into the world to be explained in a way that it literally has never been, at least to the masses anyway. Like you said, I think there are sort of a select group of people who are aware that this is going on.
Also, it was very well understood in New York State because of Hurricane Sandy.
Sure.
But it was not well understood in California.
I don't think it's understood in a lot of places.
Other donor states.
I agree.
And so I think this is a conversation where suddenly New York State, where this is quite well understood actually, was given a chance to explain it to the nation.
Right, yes.
And everyone is now realizing that when they complain about paying too much in taxes, that they're actually not even getting back what they pay.
Right.
Because if New York State kept all their taxes, they could have all sorts of glorious things.
Yeah.
I mean, they pay a lot in taxes because the financial sector is there.
Yeah.
And so there's rich people there. I mean, the financial people themselves don't seem to pay much in taxes, but I mean, just the economic activity around that, it's a wealthy city. It's the largest city in the country. It's, it's in the same way that California, we pay a lot in local taxes as they do in New York, but we also pay a lot in federal taxes because because financial activity is happening here. So if we could keep that money, we could have all sorts of nice things, but the problem is states like Kentucky couldn't have anything.
Yeah.
And states like Kentucky benefit greatly from the money that big states like California and New York put into the pot.
Totally.
And so this is a foolish game for him to play.
Yeah.
And he believes in small government, so he doesn't want the citizens of Kentucky to have anything. But I guarantee that his ability to get reelected is about his ability to bring stuff to the state, because it is for every senator. So even though he is talking like he doesn't believe in government, he does take advantage of government to bring stuff back to a state, because that is how you stay in office.
Yeah.
So he actually does lose out by illuminating this disparity.
I agree. Yep.
In any case, in final news, you guys, the North Korea story has broken wide open.
Oh, man.
No one knows what's going on. Rumors are flying everywhere that Kim Jong-Un is either dead or in a vegetative state or totally fine.
Or just fine, yeah.
We don't know anything other than that he was not at North Korea's 88th anniversary big celebration last week.
Right, and that's a big deal because it's his grandfather, right? So isn't that
right? Well, this is the sort of the celebration that celebrates the moment that his family became deities. So it's kind of important for him to be there.
Right.
So some news reports in Japan, or reports out of Japan were saying he was dead. Reports out of China were saying he was critically ill. Some other reports were saying he's in a vegetative state. The New York Post and TMZ reported that he's dead, whatever that means.
There was a report that it was due to a botched heart surgery because they tried to put in a stent. By the way, he's 36. He's gained an exponential amount of weight since taking control. Yeah. He's 5'9" and 300 pounds.
That's right.
Because he supposedly had gout the last time that he went missing.
That's
remember? Right. So it wouldn't be shocking if he was having heart problems, even at 36. He's not a healthy man.
Not a healthy man. A lifetime of being the only person with access to the makings of gluttony in your entire country will do that to you. So in any case, we don't know when or if we'll ever find out the truth.
Right.
Because you can't know. North Korea's state media could say anything, including that he's a robot now. I mean, like, any ridiculous story that you can imagine could be a story that exists in North Korean state media.
Or that the ghost of Kim Jong-Un is now the ruler of North Korea.
Exactly. I mean, they could do anything. Theoretically, the sort of sense is that his sister is who would take over if he was dead, Kim Yo-jong, who I remember we met during the Olympics because she was there during the Olympics.
Right, she sat next to the South Korean president. Right,
exactly. And she was apparently quite sort of diplomatic.
Yeah.
You know, everyone said that she was good at the diplomacy thing.
Yeah.
But no one really knows anything about her other than that maybe she is also just like tyrannical.
Right.
So she's been she's been at her brother's side in public appearances a lot. She
went to school with him.
Went to school
with
him in
Switzerland. Lived together when they were both at boarding school.
Right. And I feel like she is rumored to be their father's favorite child, whatever that is.
Because
but
it's
also
interesting because there is another brother.
Right.
Granted, he was passed over in favor of Kim Jong-un by their father. So it's not entirely surprising that maybe they might, look to her since he's been passed over.
But they've never had a female leader in this weird deity Stalin-esque.
Right. Well, they've only had 3 leaders.
Right.
Since then.
But I mean, it's been passed from son to son to son,
right.
father to son.
He doesn't have an heir.
Right. He doesn't have an heir. He has a 7-year-old daughter. So it's all very curious.
Oh my God, what if it was her?
Oh my God. Well, it could be. I mean, what's
right? Wouldn't that be amazing?
That would be classic.
Ooh, that's what I want to happen. That's my new preferred storyline.
Yeah. I can imagine that it wouldn't actually change much because I feel like
she could still outsmart Donald Trump in a nuclear negotiation.
Well, but I was thinking, like, what does this do to our negotiations with them? Because Donald Trump, if it looks like if Kim Jong-un is dead or vegetative or whatever, it looks like we're going to have potentially a female leader there. What does that do to Donald Trump's bizarro relationship with North Korea?
Well, maybe he'll love her. South Korea calls her the Ivanka Trump of North Korea. So
well, good.
Maybe they'll get along famously. Maybe he'll talk about how he wants to sleep with her because he looks like
he would do that for his own daughter. Yeah, exactly. In any case, a lot of fun speculation to be had there, especially because there's no way to get reputable news.
Right.
Which is my
your mom had a theory too, right? Should we share the Carla Nordstrom theory?
Oh, yeah. My mom thinks that they staged all of this so that he could rise from the ashes like Jesus on Easter.
Yeah.
Because she was like, this is conveniently just after Easter. So they saw that story again. And they were like, what if we did that? Yeah. So they think that she thinks that they're creating a story where he dies so that he can rise from the dead.
Yeah. Another conspiracy theory that I saw, and by saw, I mean someone asked me if it could be real, and I was like, sure, anything can be real, is that he has coronavirus.
Oh, I've heard that theory too, yeah.
Yeah, but North Korea doesn't have any coronavirus.
Well, of course not.
So, he would have to,
they have superior immune systems and genes and such.
Right.
How would it have gotten there? It would have gotten there
through South Korea potentially? No, never. Or through China on the other border.
It would have come through China. It would have. First of all, it would have come through China, and not only would it have come through China, but it's like
wouldn't have come from South Korea.
No, but it would have definitely come from China, where people do cross the border, and coronavirus originated. So it feels like exactly North Korea is like the first place that would have gotten coronavirus after all of this. So they can. They most certainly have coronavirus in North Korea, and
obviously
Kim Jong-Un is the #1 person who probably could have given it to everyone because he's the one who was probably the one who's been traveling. So in any case, we'll keep you updated on this incredibly important story that is not about coronavirus but could be. Because it's the only thing I'm living for. I can't watch the news much.
I know.
But I have been checking Twitter daily to find out what's going on with the Kim Jong-Un conspiracy theories. The dark web on Kim Jong-Un is my favorite place to be.
Yeah, fair.
So we'll have more about that next week. And the rolling crisis that we're living in. We'll talk to you then. Bye.